Graham. Great night of fights. Return to Ireland. How did you find all the fights tonight?
The fights tonight, I think the level of what we saw tonight was a lot higher than what I expected. I didn't think the level was going to be as high as it was. And I actually watched every prelim. I actually got down early and I sat cage side and watched every prelim. I watched every fight. And yeah, I think there's something special to build on. It's got that little undercurrent of talent coming through that if we just put a little bit of cream on top, it'll develop. And I think we're probably 18 months away from having a big Irish rush and what we can do here.
We kind of have that now, to be fair. Like Reeses on top, Paul Hughes on top. He was talking tonight about becoming a two-weight champ. We'll talk about Reese in a second. Paul Hughes first. Is that something you'd entertain himself maybe versus George Hardwick?
It comes down to when we do these double belts and giving someone a shot at two belts, it happens when there's nobody else in line or there's nobody else in contention for a second division where they want to step up or down to. So we have to look at what's there for George Hardwick next, who's there for George Hardwick next in the division as such, and if George Hardwick is hanging around, he may be gone. George Hardwick is a finisher, so there's a strong possibility that belt could be vacant. So if that's in line and it lines up, it's nothing's off the table. Nothing's off the table.
What about Reese's performance tonight? We spoke obviously last week and you said to get to the UFC you need finishes. He got the finish, but he also got the 4-round destructive performance. It was really everything Reese could have asked for tonight, wasn't it?
Clinical. He used his reach and his frame very crafty. He showed experience. He showed he belongs where he should be going. It depends now on what they've got lined up in that division, how many spots they've got open, how busy that roster in the division is, how many injuries they're dealing with. And yeah, I'll be making calls on behalf of Reese Monday to see if there's anything there. Hopefully there is. I don't believe that he should be defending that belt again. I would like to see him back in the UFC after that performance and a finish. So, yeah, I'd like to see him back where he belongs.
Is short notice something you're going to do again for Reese, or do you think he should go in with a full camp this time?
I would prefer Reese to have a full camp. That fight he took the last time, I don't believe he was ready then. There was a lot of hype about him then. And I believe everybody got carried away with where Reese was back then. And Reese back then only wanted the UFC then, and we thought he needed a bit more. An opportunity came up. He grabbed it. He wanted it. He took it. It played out the way it did. But I think you've got Reese version 2.0 now, and I think it'll be a completely different story when he actually goes back in there.
Two more things for me, I appreciate it. I think a lot of people thinking coming in were like, a Dublin show with no SPG and all that. How would you kind of fill the gap? But Team KF tonight, the crowd there for Team KF was special, from Adam Shelley's fight, obviously to Taka and Leon, and then to Ryan Shelley as well. How big is that for you, to have Chris Fields and Tom King producing guys for you, and they want to go the Cage Warriors route, and it really showed tonight?
I think for Chris, and I actually had a brief back and forth with Chris after the show. I know he'll be hard on himself after, a couple of losses this evening. But I said to Chris he shouldn't be hard on himself at all. He's a mentor for these guys, and he's someone that's going to bring these guys up to where they need to go. And what he's built with Team KF is special. And it's only a matter of time before the athletes that he's got there start sharpening each other and they come up together the same way that team came up when we were here in the earlier days. They all brought each other up, and Chris is starting to get that little unit together now where they're going to start doing the same thing. And it's a pleasure to work with Chris and Team Rhino and FAI, who they all have that vision. They all want to get their guys the careers that these guys want. So we're happy with that.
Last one for me. The interviews came back for the main event tonight. Obviously, we heard from Jimmy, we heard from Reese. Was that a big decision to make to bring him back? And I think everyone liked it when they came back and the interview.
You asked for him, you got him. Okay, you asked for him. So and they came back for the reason that Jimmy, it was going to be his last dance. as I said this previously, a monumental occasion to have that event, to have that main event. I can't guarantee they're going to be there again. Okay, I can't guarantee that. Okay, but they were there tonight. You guys asked for it, you got it, and you got it tonight because of the occasion, because of the main event, because we were back. But I can't guarantee they're going to be there again. We pushed that show at pace. I don't know whether you guys realised or not, but there was no messing about on the pace of that show, and we were pushing that pace so that we could get that post-fight interview in. That's why we pushed the pace so quick. Normally, a couple of first-round finishes, we'd stall, we'd drag it out a little if we had to, but we pushed the pace to get that post-fight interview tonight. Can't guarantee they're going to stay. Yeah.
Graham, first event in the Republic of Ireland since Cork in November 2019. As an Irishman, how nice was it for you to bring it back to the Republic?
Look, I want this event here 2-3 times a year. When I took over Cage Warriors back in 2010, the first thing I said in the first board meeting was, this is going to Ireland. It has to go to Ireland because every athlete at the time and every fighter across Europe was getting exposure. The Irish guys weren't, Seri was travelling to get fights abroad and fighting guys in 2 divisions up at the time. So to bring it back, it's special for us to bring it back for the way it was tonight. But I had to come back at the right time. I couldn't come back at a time when everybody was fighting elsewhere and the sport wasn't really spread out. The sport is spread now. The island has a north, south, east, west kind of club that's developing talent. So it's time we start planting the roots back in the country. Yeah.
We speak to a lot of the domestic promotions here in Ireland, and one of the challenges that they seem to come up against is the price and the logistics of putting on a show, especially after what happened with Yao Carvalho a number of years ago. Do you come across those issues or obstacles when you're trying to put on a show in the Republic?
100%. 100%. It's the most expensive territory to put a show on. We're doing a show in Rome in 6 days. I've got shows in London, Manchester. I've got shows in California, San Diego. Dublin's the most expensive. The most expensive territory to put an MMA show on. And I would doubt anybody who is doing shows at the level that we are, nobody's making money.
We've seen a lot of shows in the 3 Arena the last number of years through Bellator, but it's typically one gym that we see. Tonight there were 8 different teams representing Ireland in Cage Warriors. Is that something that's in the back of your mind? As an Irishman, do you feel a responsibility to provide opportunities to different gyms across the country?
It has to be spread. It has to be spread across the island, because if it's not, the sport is not growing across the island, We've had guys, when we've not been here, we've been bringing the guys from the island over to London, Manchester. We were bringing them to other countries, and even though we haven't been here, we've still been helping to develop the talent. Paul Hughes, Reese, Decky, they've all been fighting abroad, So they've been developing. We'll look to get more clubs involved. I believe we had, maybe 6-7 different clubs tonight. We'll work on those clubs and we'll work on developing those guys that are on the card.
The elephant in the room is obviously SPG. I know Tanio Pagliarico fought on Cage Warriors a while ago, and there was some back and forth online about logos and all sorts of stuff, but I see he's fighting again, so to me that looks like a positive sign that maybe could we see more SPG fighters in Cage Warriors also, or is that maybe a step too far right now?
About 4 years ago, I was categorically told no SPG fighter will ever fight in Cage Warriors. That wasn't my decision.
So are you saying you are open to SPG fighters fighting in Cage Warriors?
I was told no one will ever fight in Cage Warriors. I'll help them with that.
Okay, fair enough.
Thank you. There was a moment that I'm not sure that necessarily everybody saw at Cage Side afterwards, where you handed Jimmy his interim belt that he had brought to the cage with him. Can you talk us through that moment and what inspired you to do that?
Yeah. We're talking about a legend of MMA, a guy who was fighting before any of us were even in the sport. He came in here as an interim champion with that belt around his waist, and there was no way I could let him leave without that belt to put in his trophy cabinet or to frame it and put it on his wall, considering he left his glove in the cage tonight. There's a contractual issue with Cage Warriors. You get to keep the belt at Cage Warriors when you defend it 3 times. Otherwise, the belt comes back. You don't defend it 3 times, you don't keep the belt. So it is the most prestigious belt in Europe. And, I would struggled to see anybody argue with me about that. Everyone knows where they go when they get that belt on a couple of defenses. So it's a 1% club within this sport to have that belt. And considering who Jimmy is, considering the history with the promotion where he started, and he's had his last fight with us, just my heart couldn't take that belt off him and keep it. I had to give it back to him. There's no way.
It appeared like Dan Hardy was very, like it meant a lot to him to be in the cage for that moment.
I asked Dan this morning, like Davin's obviously coming. I knew he'd be here to come for Jimmy's fight. And he did a meet and greet for us. Another Cage Warriors alumni who, you know, he's always got a seat in Cage Warriors no matter what he's doing. And I messaged him this morning. It wasn't even a pre-planned situation. I messaged him this morning. I said, look, you're at the show. You're doing a meet and greet. You're going to be there for Jimmy. If he is going to leave his gloves in, I think it's only fitting that you actually send them off and you can walk off together and just, you know, I think it's the right thing to do. So I said, if you don't want to do it, I understand. But he just replied, look, I'm honored to do this. So, yeah, it worked out well.
One more from me, just regarding, you mentioned the meet and greets there, and I know these are kind of like a standard thing that you do at Cage Warriors shows, but for Molly today, it seemed like it was an important thing for her, because obviously it's been tough on her and Paddy the last couple of months, obviously coming off of their last couple of fights. To see that kind of love from the fans in person coming towards her, it seemed like that was a pretty special moment for her too.
Yeah. Molly's had her ups and downs. She's now back in camp. She's training hard. She's going to have a run out again in July. So it was nice to bring her to Ireland. She considers herself Irish. So it was nice to bring her to the Three Arena as a meet and greet, to meet the fans and mix and just put her face in there with everybody again. So she'll, London, July is when she's running back out again. And yeah, we like to fight too. I fancy a win for Molly.
Graham, obviously another fantastic event here at the Three Arena. You've set out an aggressive schedule for this year. We're coming back here again in November. What can we expect come November? Because tonight was an unbelievable card.
Well, you're going to expect the talent that we've had tonight. Hopefully, a lot of them will probably get one more between now and then. And their games raise, you know, and we see where they fit in the division. Very impressed with Shelley against Harilla. He showed a different level. Obviously, on the third, I had him 2 up going into that third. Lacking concentration, and at this level, you can't have that lack in concentration, and that cost him the fight. But he's showing signs that he's going to bounce back off that, and I reckon 3 or 4 fights from now, he's going to be the guy sitting around that division.
Absolutely. I spoke to Jordan Vucenic, who seemed to be a guest fighter at tonight's event, and he actually said he had his eye on the winner of Harilla versus Shelley. Is that a fight that you'd look to make next?
You know I'm not going to talk about that. We'll see.
And then finally, what did it mean to yourself personally to bring Cage Warriors back to Dublin, and then what did it actually mean for the brand to come back here to Cage Warriors Dublin?
To bring the show back, referring back to an answer to a previous question, I want the show here. I want to hear for all the gyms. I want to hear for all the guys, because they need it. You know, this is where there's a special air when Cage Warriors is here. You know, it's not the same as the other organisations that do come to Ireland to put shows on. There's a different atmosphere. You know, there's something special in the air when we come here, and it's stars being born. So the more we come back, the more we're going to give the Irish community the chance for these stars to be born, because I honestly believe they're just missing that platform and that opportunity that we gave the first wave. So.
And if you were to pick one Irish athlete tonight who was your standout performance, bar Reese McKee, of course, who would you pick out? Because we saw some unbelievable finishes. We saw Adam Darby with a triangle. We saw Paddy McCurry with 2 flying knees. Who really stood out for you that maybe you weren't expecting?
McCurry was very dynamic on his feet. That was impressive to watch. And it was great to see Darby come back after his previous outing, but to come back so slickly. That was a very, very slick triangle that he fired on and won the fight with. And it's like, to see him come back after that very quick knockout, I'm happy, because sometimes something like that early in your career can put you one way or the other. So those performances, 100%, super happy with them. Yeah.
Thanks very much. That's all.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, man.
All good.
I'll stay in the